What is a school? Is a school a building, a uniform, a group of teachers, a body of students, a collection of facilities, a collection of books, a timetable of learning exchanges? Whatever a school is, we know that what schools do is changing. Shifting global markets, new skills for a knowledge economy, new social needs, the internet. All of these things are ensuring that how, what, and why we learn in the 21st century is going to be very different from what we were used to in the 20th. Teachers, voters, educationalists, and policymakers will need to innovate, to think of new models for education, to make us smarter by making education smarter. What might all these changes mean for the design of schools in the future? Since the 19th century, our approach to the architecture of learning has been almost industrial. All the various activities associated with learning are subdivided into designated functions. Libraries, dining halls, assembly halls, classrooms, labs, sports facilities, and compressed onto a single site. This model of the school has been around for centuries. By compressing all the processes of exchange together in one place, what we create is a place for mass learning. Typically, when thinking of new architecture for schools, this concentrated arrangement of functions is wrapped in a brand new institutional building, constructed as a single, one-off investment. Of course, that requires a huge amount of upfront cost, both in terms of finance and carbon footprint. One of the inherited problems with this model is that once completed, this physical asset is often heavily underused. Factoring in evenings, night times, and school holidays, a typical school could be empty for 85% of the year. At the same time, lots of buildings in city and town centres are underused or unused for many hours a day. Just think about those places used primarily at evenings or weekends, such as religious buildings, historic buildings, cinemas, music venues, or public parks. What if we could use this spare resource? We would no longer think of a school as a single building, but as a civic institution embedded into a community, as part of the life of a town centre, designed as a changing, responsive architecture which can adapt and change according to how its teachers and students want to use it. The town becomes the school. It's a school which is not so much planned out as choreographed. In order for this to happen, the school needs some core pieces of infrastructure. These connect the school together wherever it is and allow students to move around the school easily and safely. The roles now played by physical elements, such as corridors, fences, school bells, notice boards, lockers, and trophy cabinets, can actually be played by non-physical systems. For example, shared information technology, clothing, student cards, bikes and bike helmets, but also parts of the public realm like cycle routes, public transport and sports fields. These are part of public spending anyway, but they take on an extra importance when part of a scale-free school. What this unlocks is a totally different set of possibilities for how schools can use spaces and make the most of their resources. So what's the benefit? In the traditional model, the focus is on creating permanent access to spaces and facilities which are owned by the school. But this presents a high cost threshold for anyone who wants to start a new school. With a scale-free strategy, we're not so focused on building physical capital, but on building social capital. That's to say, strong relationships and partnerships with local groups, businesses, and organizations. This means you spend a lot less on building costs and a bit more on operational cost. The difference is radical. Rather than having permanent access to standardized resources, the school now has occasional access to extraordinary, top-class resources, which they could not afford to own themselves. And of course, those relationships with local groups and businesses might create a whole new set of possibilities on their own. But the scale-free model also questions another core assumption, which for decades has shaped many of the political dilemmas that face education policy. Schools are built with a fixed capacity. They can only take so many students at a time. This means that successful schools experience over-competition for places. But with the ability to incrementally flex and adopt resources on a day-to-day basis, the scale-free school solves this problem. Successful schools have no reason to be selective or turn anyone away. Instead, they simply grow organically as their popularity rises. Less successful schools slowly contract. The result would be a series of learning places, neighborhoods, towns, villages, where our daily culture and our identity are actually shaped by the way learning is integrated into everyday life.